Good evening, and welcome back to the Poe Museum. Let's say it's the 1840s and you're Edgar Allan Poe. You've shown up at your writing desk, armed with your inspiration, your idea, your paper, your pen, and some ink. But there's one other tool that's absolutely indispensable to the writing process, and also good for drawing blood if you're in a pinch. What is it? We'll find out in tonight's installment of the Curator's Crypt. So here it is, Edgar Allan Poe's penknife. What's a penknife? Well, first of all, it's a knife. It has two blades that come out here. And a nice little mother of pearl handle. And Poe's name is engraved on this little silver plate on the side. And mother of pearl here comes from the inside of certain mollusk shells. And that's something Poe would have known about because he wrote a textbook on seashells, as you'll remember from a previous video. But basically, the primary responsibility of a penknife was to sharpen your quill pens. At the beginning of his career, he was using goose feather quills to write. So he would have needed this to sharpen the tip whenever it stops writing properly, stops holding the ink. And if you remember some of Poe's early manuscripts, they're immaculate. They're tiny writing. He's writing right up to the edge of the paper. And this was done with a quill pen. Later in his career, he switched to a steel tip. So the mark making is a little bit different, a little bit more uniform than with the quill pen, which gets wider marks when you press down a little bit harder, narrower when you don't press it down so hard. But he still could have used this because in addition to sharpen your quills, you could also use it to make erasures. You could actually use a blade to scrape the dried ink off your page if you made a mistake. So that's the next best thing to having an ink eraser. In addition to this, when he got correspondence, he could open his letters with it. He could, break the wax seal and use it as a letter opener. And in addition to its uses at the writing desk, Poe came up with a few other uses in his short stories. Just think of the Black Cat. Near the beginning of the story, the narrator takes out his penknife and plucks out his cat's eyeball with it. I don't recommend that. Then in The Unparalleled Adventures one's Hans Pfaall is taking a balloon to the moon, and the elevation is so high, he feels like his eyes are about to burst right out of his skull. He feels like he's going to pass out. And he doesn't have a lancet with him. It's a device for bloodletting. That was all the rage back then. If you had a problem, it's probably too much blood. Just bleed you. So he took out his trusty penknife in the story and cut open a vein, started bleeding. And then there's Poe's only finished novel, The Narrative of Arthur Gordon Pym. In that, the character Augustus Barnard needs to send a message to Arthur Gordon Pym, but he can't get him a message. Doesn't have any ink. What's he do? He pulls out his trusty penknife, cuts open his finger, and writes the message in blood. So there are plenty of uses for this tiny blade. At first, it doesn't seem like much of a weapon. Somebody might get a nasty infection with this blade, but that's about it. But there's a special story behind this particular penknife. We don't know exactly when Poe got it. There's a couple receipts that Poe's foster father had for knives he bought Edgar at different points. One was in 1820, so Poe would have been 11 years old, and it says he bought Edgar a knife, so that could be this penknife. Another was in 1829 when Poe is preparing to go to the United States Military Academy at West Point, and Allan buys him another knife. But we don't know if it's a penknife or if it's this knife. But this one, at least, we know that Poe had with him up until the last couple of years of his life. That's because of where it ended up. About a year before he died, he started visiting Lowell, Massachusetts, where he fell in love with a woman named Annie Richmond. Actually, her name was Nancy Haywood Lock Richmond, but he called her Annie. He liked the sound of Annie better, so his poem for Annie is dedicated to Nancy. And after her husband died, she legally changed her name to Annie because that's what Poe used to call her. And her husband was a wealthy miller up there. Lowell was a milling town. And her husband's cousin, Thomas Richmond, loaned Edgar some money. And to guarantee that loan, Poe gave him this penknife, which he must have thought was pretty valuable at the time because he used it to guarantee a loan. Unfortunately, Poe died within a year and wasn't able to pay off that loan. So Thomas Richmond kept the knife, passed it down to his son, Thomas Richmond II, and on through the family. And it never left the family until it came here to the Poe Museum. And the owner contacted me and said, I have Poe's penknife. It's in a safe deposit box. Nobody gets to see it. And I'd really like it to be shared with the public. And he was able to supply me old documents, newspaper clippings, and supporting evidence related to this particular knife. He drove all the way out here across the country and delivered it, and it's been here ever since. So if you come to the Poe Museum, you can take a closer look at it. And Poe's engraved name right here is very tiny, so we actually have it displayed right now underneath a magnifying glass so you can get a little bit better view of his name here. And it's also displayed next to Poe's pocket watch and his nail file. So maybe you have a precious Poe artifact sitting away in a safe deposit box, an old trunk, or in the attic. Take a look and let us know if you find one. And also, let us know down in the comments if there's any other Poe artifacts you'd like us to profile. And if you'd like to help us preserve precious Poe pieces, like Poe's penknife, or his pocket watch, or the purloined Poe bust, that's a whole different story. Why not support the Poe Museum or become a member at poemuseum.org. And until next time, thanks for joining us. And I'll leave you with more gratuitous footage of the Poe Museum cats, Edgar and Tib, doing Edgar and Tib stuff.